Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Reform UK may impact the results of the next general election, given that they have not only been going hard on their message that they will be standing candidates in every seat in Britain, but that they are bringing the old Brexit Party MEP crowd back into their front lines. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So first things first, I appear to be on Max and Alex's Sunday Roast this Sunday. I'll put a link to the channel below. And I'll do another reminder in one of the videos for tomorrow, and then of course on Sunday. I was with Rob from Truth to Power on that one, if anyone's interested. But anyway, Reform UK. First thing to note is if Reform UK campaign hard and they do stand candidates in every seat in Britain, or even the vast majority of them, they are likely to have a material impact on not only the election results, but also the body politic. And that's important. Consider that the reason David Cameron agreed to hold a referendum on EU membership at all was essentially because Tory MPs were concerned by the threat from UKIP to their electoral chances, and David Cameron wasn't strong enough to say, shut up. You know, whether the threat was real enough to be concerned about doesn't matter. The perception, and that's all that matters in politics, the perception was that they needed to circumvent the threat from UKIP, and a referendum on EU membership was the way to do it. For David Cameron personally, there are suggestions that he didn't agree with that, so he agreed to go along with this madness on the basis that it couldn't happen because he'd still need to form a coalition with the Lib Dems and they would just not permit it. In the event, Cameron won a majority and the rest is history. But it also acts as a lesson that the Conservatives really don't know how to handle their votes being split, even with a very small party. And that they will adopt extreme methods to dispel the threat in the blind panic, without any real thought or planning involved in the process, just panic. Well, the Conservatives never did make the UKIP threat go away. In fact, they made it worse. Of course, UKIP have gone away, you know, but a distilled version that's given them a headache now in the form of Reform UK was Brexit Party, the transition. Much better organised, much better resourced. Chaired by Richard Tice, as he did with the Brexit Party. It's the same party, they just changed the name. And they've joined now with the old crew from 2019. In fact, their grand announcement last week, which didn't exactly pack the room they presented from, revealed a lineup of former Brexit Party MEPs with a strong, let's get the gang back together for one last job type of vibe. The purpose of Reform UK is, of course, not to win power. They can't win power. They're not even going to win a single seat. They're not. Their purpose is to force the Conservatives to maintain an extreme manifesto of policies to prevent them returning back to more moderate ground in return for them stepping down candidates. In 2019, it worked. It worked a couple of things, I think. First, the Conservatives could give the Brexit Party what it ultimately wanted, an exit from the EU. On the face of it, the Brexit Party backed down because Nigel Farage and Richard Tice were saying, we're going to stand candidates in every seat in Britain. And then a little bit later, they said, I tell you what, we'll do a deal with you. We'll stand down some candidates if you get rid of the withdrawal agreement. We don't like your withdrawal agreement. Get rid of it and we'll stand some candidates down. To which Boris Johnson went, no. And they went, oh, okay. I tell you what, we'll stand some candidates down for you if you stand some down for us. No. All right, I'll tell you what, we'll just stand some candidates down, shall we? Yeah. Why don't you stand more down? No, we're not doing that. We're standing firm. We're just going to stand most of them down. But Brexit itself was still a motivator, but they still got what they wanted. Second, the Conservatives could afford to adopt an extreme manifesto because no one else was fighting for the centre ground. Lib Dems in theory were, but they were not very good. The situation is quite different now. You know, Labour and the Lib Dems are both more strategic. They're both fighting for the centre. And it's not immediately obvious what the Tories can offer Reform UK. You know, what deal could they possibly want to stand candidates down this time? In addition, if they do stand candidates down after insisting they won't for a second election in a row, there's just a chance that people won't believe them at the following election. And a follower of mine made a very good point, and I think they're probably on the money, that Reform UK may consider the Tories have lost the next election anyway, so they will stand candidates in order to make a point to the Tories, in order to say to them, we're kingmakers, you listen to what we say. There is a lot of credibility to this notion. Indeed, it's been done before. You know, when The Sun published a front page supporting Tony Blair ahead of his first general election win, because there were plenty of headlines in The Sun attacking Labour and Tony Blair, but there was this one supporting him in the election, or for the election. It wasn't really support for Labour. It was punishment for the Conservatives for dropping John Major like Murdoch wanted. It was Rupert Murdoch saying, my support for the Conservatives is not unconditional. There is a price to be paid and you will heed that price. Reform UK could easily do the same. They could make the price for standing down in Tory target seats for the following election that Tories adopt policies, and preferably a leader that they can live with, that they approve of. In fact, you can see the scenario. Reform UK stand candidates in a load of marginal seats. They don't really have the infrastructure to go for candidates everywhere with a suitable vetting process. If they try and actually put candidates in every seat in Britain, I can see that going a little bit wrong for them, because they will end up with a lot of loonies. And some of those loonies will be exposed during the campaign itself, and it'll be quite embarrassing for them. But maybe they don't care about that, or maybe they will, and they will think very carefully and just think, right, let's concentrate the non-loony, let's get non-loony candidates, that'll be hard enough, or at least non-loony loony candidates that can keep their mouth shut about certain things, and let's stick them in the important seats. The Conservatives lose the election, which they probably would have done anyway, but certainly Reform UK will make certain, including some seats by a margin that could easily be put down to the inclusion of Reform UK. So then the Conservatives are reeling from their loss, working out their future leadership, because Rishi Sunak's surely not going to be allowed to carry on. Reform UK pop up and say, if you want to fight against us in the next election as well, you carry on. Or we could be persuaded to stand down in important seats if you address our needs. They've got their own news station, GB News, to make sure the Tories are under no illusions as to which leader they would prefer. In fact, they might stand candidates down in the seats of Tory MPs whom they approve of, you know, just to emphasise their point. The problem for the Conservatives is they're then stuck with a sort of catch-22 of sorts. If they agree to Reform UK's demands, which could include a leader they can live with, it might even include certain types of candidates for MP for the following election. Because the Tories are very likely to lose a lot of MPs, and that'll include some of their crazes. Reform UK may want to make sure that the Parliament that forms for the following election has a higher proportion of crazes in the Tory party. And they may say, we will stand down candidates in seats that are contested by a Tory candidate we approve of. You know, so there can be all sorts of demands from Reform UK. And if the Tories agree to them, their main political position will be out of kilter with the main target voters. That gives Labour an easier time of winning the following election as well. If the Conservatives insist on fighting the centre ground for the following election, then they will have to contend with Reform UK, sapping their strength in lots of seats around the country. Unless, of course, the political outlook in the country changes to the point where Reform UK supporters no longer see the need to be mad at everything. I'm not sure I'll see that happening. The Daily Express is still a thing. But if Reform UK actually mean it about standing candidates against the Tories, as well as Labour this time, and they're doing so as part of a long-term plan to apply major external influence on the Tories, then the Conservatives are going to need a serious conversation about how they deal with that. And they really ought to be starting it now. And it will not be in their interest to adopt what they see as the laziest solution. The laziest solution is to give in to them, as they've been doing for the past decade. As for my personal views on the prospect, obviously there's good and bad here, but I mostly see bad, I have to say. You can look at it, you can think strategically. This is going to give not just Labour, but the Lib Dems and the SNP implied a boost, because Reform UK can take votes from everywhere, but they take more Tory votes than they do anyone else's. So it's a net gain to anyone else. Reform UK aren't credibly going to steal loads of Tory votes, but they will attract some, and they'll attract more Tory votes than anyone else. So it's a net win to particularly Labour, but pretty much anyone. In tight contests, it means more non-Tory MPs. coupled with the possibility that whoever wins the SNP leadership contest next Monday may not be able to follow Sturgeon's acts quite so well. And Labour are suddenly looking at a bit of an unexpected bonanza here. But, and I cannot stress this enough, the inclusion of Reform UK in so many seats around the country will result in a great deal of toxic debate. The media will give them more airtime than their support warrants. They will get wall-to-wall coverage on GB News. That's basically their station. Essentially, anyone on the right wing of politics that wants the Conservatives to change direction will give Reform UK support, or at least a platform. It'll be ugly, make no mistake. As bad as the Tories are, Reform UK are sort of like the Tories but without the need to try and appeal to moderates because they don't expect to win. That makes them, in terms of their impact on political discourse, actually way worse. The only silver lining I can really see is that they're also in favour of proportional representation, because with proportional representation, they could actually win some seats. The only reason UKIP and the Brexit Party won seats in the European Parliament is because proportional representation. Would that be worth it? I don't know. I mean, I'd personally prefer it if all they did was go on a 10-year holiday while we try and clean up some of their mess. You know, I'm not sure draining a few votes from the Conservatives and occasionally saying something positive about PR is a net benefit right now. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.